Welcome to another edition of Politics Done Right. I'm here with Republican Congressman Jim Renacci, I should say former Congressman. How are you doing today, Congressman?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Well, look, one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you is because you wrote a new book, and that book is titled, and it made a hell of a lot of sense to me, right? It's titled The GOP's Lost Decade, and you can see that on the screen right now, the GOP's Lost Decade. Why did you write this book?
Well, look, I was a businessman for almost 3 decades, went to Washington because I was frustrated with how Washington was working, spent 8 years, 4 terms in Washington. After the 6th year, I realized that Washington was broken, decided to come back home, and then I didn't want to get away the memoirs from my 8 years as to why I left, why it's broken, and how really the GOP, who came storming in 2010, especially on the side of debts and deficits, that we were going to get our debts and deficits straightened out, how we were able to let a complete decade go and not get anything accomplished, except for the Tax Cut and Jobs bill, which was done. Even that was done based on a what I call the funny way things get done in Washington. It wasn't even normal business.
Well, as it turns out, I love the way you said you got to Washington. If I understand the book correctly, you said that you owned, I think, one of the GM dealerships, and because of the way the bailout for GM worked out, you were one of the people that were cut. So back in 2010, I believe, during the 2010 election, you came with the Tea Party wave. And in as much as you're not really a Tea Party fanatic, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's funny. When I first ran, there were Tea Party candidates that I was running against, and I was considered, I was a business guy, so I was considered not a Tea Party guy. I ran in a 4-way primary, won that election, and then all of a sudden after I won, I became the Tea Party guy. But really, you're right. I was somebody who believed in fiscal responsibility. But let's face it, I believe that in your personal life, I believe that in your business life, and I believe government should be fiscally responsible as well. And that's what was my real driver for going to Washington.
Now, I'd like you to tell me a little bit about the book. Tell me a little bit about why do you think the GOP lost a decade? And then I want to then challenge a couple of tenets with you, civilly, of course, because as you know, you believe I have all your, I respect you because again, you believe in talking to people. In as much as I found some of what you've said rather ideological, I like that you entertain conversation.
Yeah, well, let's face it. What I've often said is we all have opinions. We all want to get to the same place. We can disagree, but we can respectfully disagree. But at the same time, we want to get to the same place in a lot of ways. And even though we can disagree, we don't have to give up principles and values to get things accomplished. But in Washington, too often, both sides take their corner, and all the guys and gals in the middle are lost, and that's what's so unfair.
That is so true, and that's what I like about what you said. Now, you said that one of the genesis of you getting into Congress was that GM just sent you a letter. In fact, it was the first part of your book. And, in scanning the book, I didn't have a lot of time to go through it. I'm like, wow, he started with the letter. Tell us a little bit about that. What drew your ire from that letter?
Well, let's face it. I was a business guy. I was running multiple businesses. I was a serial entrepreneur. I had a General Motors dealership. I was a turnaround guy. I took businesses that were failing and helped them stabilize and come back. And that's what I did with this GM dealership. General Motors actually came to me early on and said, we'd love you to take over this GM dealership. It has problems. We know you're one of the people who can turn it around. And I did. And I was working with them. I agreed to even turn around and and build a brand new location. So I agreed to do a lot of things they had asked me to do. At the same time, in 2009, all of a sudden they made the decision that the federal government took over General Motors, made the decision they were going to get rid of dealerships. General Motors told me I had no problem. I was one of the people that was doing the right things. And then lo and behold, in June of 2019, I get this letter that says, from General Motors saying, you are no longer going to be part of the General Motors family. And it was a shock to me. But what really caused me more grief was I contacted my congressman at the time. Now, I hadn't dealt much with Congress, but I called my congressman. He came to meet with me. He was a Democrat congressman, a good guy. And we talked and we walked around the dealership. And he told me that he was going to help me get my dealership back. And I respected that. And but I was also told, don't trust those people in Washington. Now, it wasn't just the Democrats. I mean, I was being told, don't trust those people in Washington. And so I watched the voting that was going on in my office. And there was a vote that was coming up to reinstate my dealership, along with many other dealers across the country. And that congressman who had promised me he would help me voted against that piece of legislation. And that's what really, caused me to say, Paul, this place is broken. Washington is broken. You can't be trusted. I called him, left him a message he didn't pick up. And I said, I don't need you to lie to me. You can't be trusted, and I'm going to remove you from office. It was that much for him. Not as much for me. I had 58 employees that were counting on me to keep that business running. And so I was fired up. And that was really the reason I ran. I jumped into a national race that I never expected. There was millions of dollars thrown at me, against me, calling me things that just weren't true, but that's the way politics work. And I ended up defeating this guy and going to Washington.
Yeah, that was quite interesting. Now tell me, what should the GOP, in your opinion, have done? Why specifically, in a few bullet points, why specifically do you think they lost this decade, in your opinion?
Well, if you look back in 2009 and 2010, the majority changed. Republicans took over the House of Representatives. There were a lot of business people. There were a lot of people who realized that we had to start coming together. You know, in business, you may not agree with everything that has to be done, but you're going to always do what's best for the business and the employees that work for you, because that's the only way you'll survive. And you have to look to the future, not just to the next election. And in Washington, what happened was all of these new members, men and women, come to Washington, and we start thinking we're going to change things. We're going to reduce the debts and deficits. We're going to get an immigration system that works. We're going to do all the things that are necessary. And 10 years later, we did nothing. So we lost a complete decade, and it was my decade. I lost a decade out of my life trying to change things. And now I realize that the system is broken and probably can't be changed.
What is interesting is you and I agree on that 100%. The system is broken. There are two rails. And I think you came into Congress in an ideological fashion, the same way a lot of us on the left side of the aisle come in an ideological fashion. And what we find out is that there's a certain gravity within Washington itself. And I call it the two-track system, right? The left track and the right track. But guess what you find with the left track and the right track? They all move in the same direction. In other words, you weren't going to go and change just as much as me as a lefty isn't going to go up there and change anything, unless we have a true cataclysmic event as we have now with COVID-19. So before I go ahead and let's say challenge a few, let's say, conservative concepts, I would love to hear how would you like to see us get out of COVID-19? You've already said that the GOP has lost the decade, and I think if guys like you had spoken personally, if guys like you had spoken up more of you spoken up, right? We probably could have come to some good compromises. How do we though build up use COVID-19 as a catalyst to a better America?
Well, I still think, and when you get to my final chapter in my book, you'll see that I do put out the answers. We got to get government working the way it's supposed to work. We got to have discussion. I mean, I say in my book that bipartisanship is not a problem, and it shouldn't be. Well,
I love that.
Well, every morning, every first morning every week, we had a bipartisan meeting where Republicans and Democrats, a good friend of mine, John Carney, who's now the governor of Delaware, we started the group. We would talk about where and how we could work together to get things accomplished. And I can tell you that there was a lot of good discussion in that group. But when the group left and went on its own, then the political world took over and leadership. Now, the difference was, and one of the things that I was always proud of, I didn't need the job. So when I went to Washington, when I would get a call from the Republican leadership and they would say, Renacci, what are you doing here? I co-sponsored bills that they just didn't like. And I said, well, are they good bills? Yeah, but we can't do them. Well, that's a problem. And I think in the end, the best way you can do that is break the system back to where it should be. Every hearing, have hearings. We don't have hearings anymore. And when you have hearings, here's the problem with hearings. When the Republicans are in charge, they can name 4 of the 5 witnesses, which means they put the witnesses in that they want to say are going to tell their message. And when the Democrats, who are now in charge, have a hearing, they put their 4 witnesses in. So when we had when we had the majority, they would put 4 witnesses in that would talk about they were all slanted toward the Republican theme, and then the Democrats would put 1 witness in. Well, they're doing that now. The Democrats are going to lose a decade now, by the way, because what's going to happen is they're going to slant everything their way. So let me give you an example. Today, if you look at how we're going to fix COVID-19, you have the Democrat Senate saying we want to, pay people $2,000 a month. You have the Republican Senate with a whole nother position. You have the Republican House who wants to encourage business to be able to, grow their business. And you have the Democrat Senate who wants to bail out municipalities and states and reverse the Tax Cut and Jobs bill. So if you think about that, you have 4 different bodies in 2 of the major bodies that are absolutely going in different directions because nobody's having hearings, nobody's working together, and nobody's discussing ways they can work together.
I want to challenge you on a few things. And specifically, I think I have a tenet that a message I put out there all the time. That I say you have to think people first and then fit business for what best suits people. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think you have to do both.
What I'm saying, I don't think you can do both, in my opinion. Please correct me if you don't agree. But I don't think this is parallel but sequential. But in other words, I think we have to first picture what is best for people. When I say people, I mean humanity, and then the economic structure built around that. Shouldn't that be the way we look at it from a moral standpoint?
Well, look, I do think we always need to consider people, absolutely. But at the same time, the best way in a capitalist society is that business has to be able to survive so that people can grow and prosper. Look, if you look at my life, I was the poorest of poor. All right. Mm-hmm. I wore hand-me-down clothes to a school. So I also saw an opportunity to live the American dream. And at the same time, I took people with me. So if you look at my history in business, there are several people that started out like me that I took them with me. And I think in the end, business is what gave me the opportunity to help others. And now those others got to help others. And there's a way of making it work. But I think without business, you can't help people because without tax revenue, you can't help people. So it's an interesting circle. But I would also tell you the best example I can give you, and there are good business and bad businesses. When I lost my Chevy dealership, I had 58 people that worked for me that would have drove to Washington, D.C. to defend me. And I think those are the kind of business, that's a business mentality where you're working together with the people to change and move America forward.
Now, Congressman, let me first say, first of all, I think you're exceptional. And the reason I'm saying that is, I think you have to understand that first, your exceptionality to see why you are able to perform within a capitalist society. Unfortunately, I don't think 99% of Americans share that and share what you're able to bring. So again, I have to ask and that's the reason I simply always say we have to look at humanity first, because those of us who are able to be very independent and go off and do things, yes, we can do them. But shouldn't we have to be more? There's a part of your book that I want to go over. You said that one of the big costs that regulations bring to you is that you have to, your cars, when you're selling a car, it has a $2,000 addition on that car because of healthcare. And I agree with you, it shouldn't be there. But the solutions to problems like that, in your sphere, it's let's not have to have that cost. In my sphere, it's let's detach that away from you. And because what are you doing in healthcare? What are you doing in a lot of these other areas? You shouldn't be, in my humble opinion. Don't you think if we decoupled things like healthcare and social programs from business, which you are great at, would make a better and more an economy that functions better?
The only problem is government doesn't look. So the government system is broken. So here's why I would disagree with you, but would say I think this is an area that we should talk about. The reason government system is broken is because government does only look. And I hate to say this because some of the members of Congress are still my friends, but you'll read it in my book. If you're there more than 8 years, you're part of the problem. Because if you can stand, and that's Republicans and Democrats, by the way, if they can stand the system to be there, then they're part of the problem because the system is broken. So the system doesn't work in the best interest of you and me. The system works in the best interest of the system. And if you decouple it, you've now put something into a bad system that's going to get worse.
But you were there, Congressman. My contention is better that I have more faith in you than you have in you. In other words, my contention is that if you wanted to buck the system, you had 90-something guys go up there. And you're a very sensible guy. And in listening to your rationality right now, I think you could have made a difference. I honestly think you could have made a difference, as well as several Democrats out there. I think when you come from the tenet that you say government doesn't work, that is almost saying we the people don't work. I came from another country. One of the reasons I came here is we the people could actually get things done. And I think we the people is supposed to be the government. And if it's not there right now, I think we have to get in there like you tried to do and do something about it. And you know what? You didn't have to, you're a rich guy. You didn't have to do that.
You hit the nail on the head. We the people will make it work, but we the people are not there anymore. So what happens in government is you get there, and if you try and buck the system in government, remember, especially if you move to the middle, if you move, and by the way, we're polarized. I say this in my book too. You know, one of the problems with the House and even the Senate, but one of the problems with the House is that we gerrymandered the districts all across the country so that Republicans have strong districts, Democrats have strong districts. Mm-hmm. Now, my district was what they called in the one of the districts that I had to always fight for. You know, I was an R+2. When people say, "Oh, that's an R district," well, wait a minute. You're either going to be an R or a D. But if you're inside the R5 or the D5, you're in a district that you have to
competitive.
Talk to people. Right. And you have to be able to work with people. So if you go to my district, you'll find that I was in an R2 district and I won by 4 points, my second race. And then I turned it into an I won by 38. I I had Democrat mayors endorsing me. All right, and that's because I would listen to them and I would work with them. But I was a different person. You're right. If you're in a far left district or a far right district, you don't have to listen to anybody because you're going to end up always getting elected no matter what you do.
No, Congressman, and that's the point that I was trying to make. That if you go in there, you see, you shouldn't be calling yourself a Republican or a Democrat. You should be calling yourself a fixer. You shouldn't be talking about going to the middle because the middle is a mythical place, right? There's no middle. It's policy by policy by policy. In other words, what policies do you support? And I think, again, given that let me give an example. We have COVID-19, and I want to hear, before we close this out, I want to hear your suggestions for COVID-19, because that is one of the major issues that I want to get opinion from a more conservative person from. A lot of people are fighting right now. Should we give basic income for now or not? Should we bail out blue states or not? And I think these are silly arguments, right? I saw people, in fact, with all due respect, I saw a tweet that, I don't know if you put it out or retweeted or something, that said something to the effect of, let's not bail out states that are poorly run. Well, or all those states that take, as Cuomo said, that every single year they take more than they actually give into the federal coffers, all those states that don't educate their people, or all those states like Texas, the state that I'm in, where 1 million people are uninsured and die prematurely, they have good fiscal numbers because they don't take care of their people. Or are we supposed to then believe that somehow we shouldn't, for these guys that put more into the system than they take out, not really give them back some of what they put in?
So again, what I always say, and I did tweet that out, I think we should take care of the states in their COVID-19 crisis. And there are issues that are affected by every state in COVID-19. But there are states that haven't done enough. And I'll use Ohio as an example. Ohio was told their unemployment system was not solvent in 2019. And what they did, they didn't fix it because it wasn't a problem. It wasn't an emergency. It was only funded about 30% of what it needed. So now they go into COVID-19, and now their unemployment system is a mess in Ohio. And they're probably going to be insolvent. So should federal dollars go to Ohio, and again, that's my state, to fix an unemployment problem that they should have fixed on their own, or should it go to Ohio to fix a COVID-19 problem? That's where I look at it.
Philosophical differences. We are Americans. I say yes. In other words, yes, I look at it as an insurance policy. And that is where I talk about, and I think I could convince you as a congressman to say yes. Because what we're going to find is every single state is going to have things that they've done stupidly, in my humble opinion. And I say, let's use, if we are printing money like crazy, which we are, and which we can afford to do, it's not like we're going to get buckets of dollars like we had in Germany, because if there's no scarcity, you can't get inflation. What we need here is, it would be nice if we got a little bit of scarcity of something so you can't have inflation. I know it doesn't go with your purview as a businessman, because it kind of seems like people are getting something for nothing, but actually it's helping you too. So I say yes.
Yeah. So, and again, the difference is I would probably sit and listen to you, and we probably would come up with a compromise to move forward. That doesn't mean I would disagree with you, and that's probably the difference. But that's the business person in me, because I realize to move forward, you do need a compromise. But I will also tell you what I fear more than anything. Do you have children?
Yes, I do. Med school.
Okay.
That's expensive, yeah.
Right. So I have 3 children. I don't have a grandchild yet, but who's going to pay for all this? I mean, at some point, you've got to put fiscal responsibility back into the budget.
Congressman, you and I know better than that. You are a very smart, economically aware person. and that is nobody has to pay for it. I mean, I know it sounds strange, but you know deep inside that I'm telling you a fact. When we had quantitative easing, nobody really paid for that. The thing about it is what faith you have in your dollar, what faith you have in the economic system, and whether there is scarcity. That's all that really matters. We can't tell that out loudly because we don't want abuse. There's a MMT economist, her name is Stephanie Kelton, and she points out that there's a $685 billion slack, meaning at another inflated $685 billion in the economy, that is when scarcity comes into play and we get into that runaway inflation point that you're talking about.
Well, what's even worse, though, you have said something, and I 100% agree with you. As long as there is comfort and the monetary, the dollar is what people look at as strength, we're fine. When I said, one of the things I talked about in my book is that we needed, forget about the president coming every year and doing a State of the Union. We needed a fiscal State of the Union address. Mm-hmm. And I tried to push that just so people understand what we're spending, why we're spending it, where it's going. And I had people say to me, Renacci, you'll cause the collapse of the economic system if you push that. I had Republicans and Democrats tell me that. So I went to, and I said, what are you talking about? They go, well, go talk to Standard & Poor's or go talk to one of the credit ratings and see what they say. So I flew to New York, which I always did, got my, and I sat down with the head of Standard & Poor's, and he said to me, Congressman, look, as long as the United States is looked at as a secure currency, we'll be fine. But when the currency turns, and by the way, that's where China was going with all this. If China or one of these other countries become the currency that everybody looks toward, then the United States, then we're going to be in trouble with all the debt deficits we have.
And he's right. The thing about it is there isn't a person other than, a country other than China right now that presents a problem in that regard. Unfortunately, we have China going to South America, Africa, Central America, and all these places building their goodwill, with us doing exactly the opposite. And you just said the magic. If we are the sovereign currency, we can really do as we please, and in effect pump up our economy. The problem is we are no longer really interested in saving our people. We're internationalists right now. Not that that is a bad thing, but in a lot of ways, what we do is not for your small company, even though it's several $1 million, but for the big corporations, they look at things a bit differently. But I enjoy speaking to you, Congressman, because you are, unlike many others, a thinker. And I know that, you'll sit down and look at the mere fact that you went out there to Washington says much. Yeah. I mean, went out to New York to speak to Standard & Poor's says much. None of those other Congress people are doing that.
No, but you know what? I always try to get to the facts, and I always love to listen. In our one of the things I loved about our bipartisan meetings, I used to tell people, they say, why do you go to those things? I said, because I want to hear why they think we're wrong, or I want them to hear why I think they're wrong. And in the end, I actually sometimes came out of the meetings and said, you know what? Now I understand. I'm wrong. But that's how it works.
Well, Congressman, I don't have much time here, so I'm going to ask you to do something real quickly for me. Give me your quick solutions to COVID-19, pumping this economy back up.
Well, look, we've already started. I do think we have to balance health with the economy. You just can't close everything up. Some states did. One thing beautiful about our country is we have 50 different models. So we're going to be able to see a model. Some states shut down. Some states opened up sooner. I think in the end, there's got to be balance. I think we got to listen. I think we got to talk to economists and health professionals, and we got to take the best track, which is best for everyone. That's difficult in politics. I understand that. But the best track for everyone, as my son, who is a doctor at Mount Sinai in New York, would tell you, the best track for everyone will probably mean there will be more deaths, but it also means that we'll have an economy that will grow out and work as well. Now, a month and a half ago, he would have told me the only track is to shut everything down. But I think he's starting to realize from a healthcare professional, there's got to be balance.
I don't know if I quite, when you say balance, we still have the essential workers out there. So we're really not into a shutdown. The thing about it is, I get concerned about where balance is compared to an economy, etc. I don't think there's a problem with pausing the economy to quickly make debts as small as possible and then restarting later. The only problem I think in restarting the economy is exactly what's happening now. All those guys that are running to Washington to take advantage of what's going on right now. But again, right there is something else we'll have to talk about at another time. I want folks to go out and get the book, The GOP's Lost Decade. It's a good book, thus far from the parts that I've read. And Congressman Jim Renacci, I don't know if I probably did it wrong. I like that you are willing to have a civil discussion. I disagree with some of what I've seen so far, but I think I would be able to convince you of some of the particular issues. Maybe you can convince me of a few as well. So I'd like to talk to you again at some other time, Congressman.
That would be great. And just one little other thing. Remember, everybody's decision is always based on the economic condition they're in. So if they don't have a job or they're losing their business, they want to go back to work. And that's why I said you almost have to listen to everybody. But I do respect your opinion as well. And I think I can convince you of some things as well. And you can convince me. And let's do that. Let's talk again.
Jim Renacci, former Ohio Congressman and author of The GOP's Lost Decade. I really enjoyed talking to you, my friend.
I did the same. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
I'm Egberto Willies, host of Politics Done Right, an independent news program. I post several news videos of interest every day. I ask you so kindly to subscribe to my channel, and please leave me some comments. Thank you very much.